Welcome this evening. This is Dr. John Brimhall with Dr. Patrick K. Porter joining us today, and Clark Tilley in the background helping us to take questions. So if you have questions during the presentation, please jot them down. You can send them to Clark and he'll refer them on to Dr. Porter. Dr. Porter is back by popular demand, to say the least, to come to homecoming this year. Homecoming is going to be January 4, 5, 6, the very first week of January, which we've never done that early before, but we had a lot of interest for people who wanted to get going before they got back to work, and Dr. Porter had it open, so we captured him to come with us today on the webinar, and then he will be there, one of the major presenters this next year at homecoming, January 4, 5, and 6. And he'll have his entire staff there. I mean, he took up half the room. He had so much interest last year. Brings his wife, and she runs the show. And I think what you guys must have 6 or 8 people there, and they certainly did a wonderful job. If I had a claim to fame, I guess it would be that in my 48 years of practice, I developed a system called the 6 steps to wellness. And one of those steps, of course, being a chiropractor, was structural, one was emotional, one was nutrition, etc. But the emotional triangle, a part of the triangle, it can be a little tricky, particularly if doctors don't want to learn how to do it or take the time to do it or have somebody trained in the office to do it. We do all those things. But you can use Dr. Porter's system and the girls can run it completely. All you have to do is refer them to it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Porter. We'll both answer questions towards the end. Please mark on your calendar January 4, 5, and 6. Not only Dr. Porter going to be there, but my son, Dr. Brett, who uses this in his practice every day. I mean, he sells, I don't know, Dr. Porter, you can probably tell me better than I know, but I know he sells hundreds of them a year because he likes all these patients do this work. It helps his work to hold so much better. And then Dr. Harris has perfected the methylation testing and treatment. In fact, look for the next Monday puzzle piece. He's written an article, and he and I are going over that now. It really is the key. Maybe the things that have you or your patient stuck is methylation. And a methylation can be affected with emotion. So let's do everything right. Dr. Porter, we'll turn it to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. John. Yeah, if they want to come to homecoming too, like you said, they'll be able to try out some of the equipment and see some of the slides that I'm going to be sharing with you today, and get their own neurological reading to see what's going on for them, and they can do that with their patients as well. So we're gonna start right now. One of the biggest things that's happening right now, of course, is this stress that's going on right now, and most of the doctors probably know that there's this chain reaction that happens called the fight or flight. But actually, before that happens, there's something called the freeze response. And the reason that's important is this freeze response disrupts all the natural systems of the body. And it is really part of this genetic wisdom we have. If you drive up on a deer, it doesn't just figure out, do I fight or flee? It actually freezes first, and that disrupts all the neurological systems. Now, if that happens over and over again, which is what we're talking about today with sympathetic survival syndrome, then the body starts to dysregulate. And that's every system of the body, because we're disrupting the gut-brain axis. And that's where I know that a lot of the people that I ran into last year at your event, when we're talking about the gut-brain axis and nutrition, we need to get the brain and the body to be communicating. And that's one of the key things to overcoming this and really getting that during. So during this fight or flight, when we disrupt this hormonal signal, what happens is these natural functions break down. And the key one that you don't want to have disrupted right now is your immune system. With everything that's going on in the world today, we need our immune system, the white marker cells of the body, to be regulating perfectly. If they overregulate, then we get flu-like symptoms, and we can actually create an allergic reaction. If they underregulate, then our body is prone to disease or dysfunction. So we want to really figure that out. One of the things that might happen to some of the doctors out there, or to even some of their patients, is what happens to when my wife's my father-in-law was alive. When he'd take a vacation, the first 3 days of his vacation, he had to overcome an illness because he had what's called the letdown effect. His body, he was so used to having so much stress. He was an engineer that ran an AC Delco factory. So when he went on vacation, his body didn't know how to function without all that stress. And he'd get migraine headaches, he would be bedridden, and then they would go on the family vacation. And finally, by the time he wound down his body, and was supposed to have a great vacation. It was time for him to go back to work. So we're talking about here, especially when we're talking about like the brain tap program, is to get your body regulating daily. You know, our body's in cycles every day. It's not just women that go through cycles. All of us men go through cycles, and our body goes through cycles every day. And we can go through cycles of stress, and we can go through cycles of de-stressing. And the best thing, of course, when we're talking about heart rate variability, is to be able to handle the stress, deal with it, and then de-stress. What happens to some people is they get locked into that fight or flight. And this is why we say it's the most dangerous epidemic on earth right now. And all chiropractors know about the sympathetic, parasympathetic dominance that's out there. But when somebody has this sympathetic overload, the body gets locked in. It's almost like a radio station that somebody put the car into the radio station in the old days where he had the dials and then took the knobs off so you can't change the channel. And you want to sometimes maybe listen to country music, and other times you might want to listen to classical, but because the dial's not able to tune in, fight or flight. And I don't care who you are and what you're doing, if you don't get into parasympathetics, the rest and digest portion, you're not going to relax. And the reality is that everybody out there today, if you go to the grocery store, now that you're aware of it, you're going to notice that on the cover of at least half the magazines out there, there's going to be something about the brain, something about brain stress, how to overcome it, what's happening. And this happens because all of us listening on this call today, we're all getting better looking and more intelligent with age. And so we want to preserve our brain. You know, we don't want to get old, and who cares if we live to be 125, 200 years old, but we forget all of our memories from 70 years on. We want to keep our brain functioning at the highest level of efficiency. And if we have brain stress, we're having inflammation in the brain. This inflammation is going to show up in my world as a high delta activity, which we're going to talk a little bit about in a moment. When you're in high delta, which means your brain's trying to rest, but then we use synthetics like coffee or other stimulants, what happens is, yeah, those stimulants will keep us going and will synthetically prop us up, but the reality is the body will eventually give out, because when we're using the neurohormonal system to regulate this fight or flight response, it's like we're using our generator during a tropical storm or a hurricane, and pretty soon we're going to run out of gas because there's no place to go get it. So we want to get the reality is, if we can regulate through the sympathetic, parasympathetic on-off regulation, we can have a lot of energy, we can handle stress, we can handle relaxation, and our neurohormonal will function appropriately. Now, this prolonged stress, as I said at the very beginning, we've termed it sympathetic survival syndrome, and now that's kind of getting out there in the industry. People are talking about it, and what we mean by that is something akin to what's known as low-level chronic stress. People wake up stressed, they go to bed stressed, they don't know what life is like without stress, and then they go out and, unfortunately, maybe not anybody on this call, but your patients will go out and they'll drink alcohol, or they'll do drugs, or they'll take pharmaceuticals, whatever it is, just to get out of this sympathetic feeling, and they want to get into parasympathetics. Now, a lot of those solutions will give you a synthetic high, or the feeling like you're in parasympathetics, but the reality is that the body is still going through, churning through all that stress and burning out everything at the core, and eventually, again, the body will give out. We estimate that at least 2 billion people, 1/3 of the world's population right now, is suffering from this sympathetic survival syndrome. Now, in your client base or your patient base in your office, it's probably more like 90%, because you're not seeing everybody. And the unfortunate part of being a chiropractor is that we still have only less than 10% of the population in America using chiropractic care. But these are the ones that are a really bad situation. And I think what's hurting a lot of chiropractors is that they keep dealing with pain, which is appropriate. We should deal with pain. But the reality is that it's more about the brain and dealing with stress that's precipitating or agitating the pain in the body. The pain will show up in the area that is most affected. And that's where it comes to, there's a really good book out there. If you haven't read this or gone to YouTube and watched Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, this is a wake-up call for you to go to YouTube when we get off this and go watch that video, because people act differently than zebras just on the surface. We all know that. But a zebra, if he wakes up in the morning, the zebra isn't thinking about bills or how they're going to make their car payment or if they're going to get the raise. All they care about is that they're second fastest, or I mean the second slowest. There's always got to be one zebra slower than you, and you're going to make it to the evening. If you're the slowest zebra, you could end up as dinner for the lion in the Serengeti. So, but the book goes on to say, if a zebra, when it's being chased by that lion, knows it has 4 or 5 minutes of fast sprint, and if it can outrun that lion, outlast the lion, that lion's going to get tired. It's going to go back under the shade, and the zebra's now free to resume its business. And so the zebra just puts their head down once the lion goes back. The zebra puts its head down, starts eating, forgets all about the lion. It doesn't go to meetings. It doesn't get badges. It doesn't call up its zebra friends and say, hey, this lion just chased me around the Serengeti. It basically forgets that negative experience and just resumes its life, because that's the life of a zebra. So people will, again, they will experience the stressful event. They will form groups around that stressful event. They will call their family and friends about that stressful event. And this causes the brain to literally relive that stressful event. In psychology, they call that revivification, which means we've revived that memory. We brought it back to life. So the reality is, situations don't cause stress. Our reaction to situations cause stress. So we need to train our brain to react differently to stress, and then we change the way stress is affecting us. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's not just that there's a problem, there is a unique solution. Now, one of those solutions obviously is chiropractic care. But then there's a golden window, an opportunity in a chiropractor's office that Dee Dee Palmer and Heidi Havoc, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, they have found out. She rekindled what was always in your textbooks. There's 20 minutes after you make that neurological adjustment where the brain is prime for neuroplasticity. You've just made the adjustment. The brain is now wiring and firing around that adjustment. Now, if you can get them to relax and use the brain tap, now you're going to run those brain circuits. Those circuits are going to gain strength and momentum, and they're going to last for longer periods of time, meaning that the clinical results that we all want are going to be longer lasting. Now, if you just have them jump up off the table after you did the adjustment, you run a risk that it will last. Of course, we call it a tail light warranty. As long as you can see their tail lights, it's working, but they didn't get a chance to really absorb that. Now, Dee Dee Palmer mentioned that. All chiropractic textbooks mention that, but most chiropractors forget about it. They don't do that because the goal, of course, is to get them in and out as fast as you can. The reality is the only way really long-term sympathetic survival syndrome is going to be overcome is to first use the chiropractic adjustment to disengage that sympathetic overload, turn on parasympathetics. We need to get them into theta, and we can do that very easily through the brain tap system. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So why is that important? Well, number one, we live in a very fast-paced world. We live with a 24-hour email text cycle. We're in pressure to multitask. There's traffic. In fact, they say if we could download our parents or grandparents or whoever was a distant relative, we were put them into the middle of a large city, they would probably die of neuroshock. So the key here is, how do we get people to function in a reality that we're chronically stressed all the time? And by the way, for those of you out there that are too happy, your body doesn't know the difference between being too happy or too sad. It needs to have a variability of events so the nervous system gets exercised. But if you're too happy, there is a solution for that. Just turn on CNN. You're going to find out really quick how to be depressed, unhappy, and find things you can't do anything about. So we very rarely have people come into our clinics that say, hey, I'm too happy. Can you help me out with that? But when this happens, there's a lot of risks that happen. We call these 21st century super stress events. So your brain can have these events, which means the stress hormones impair the neurological function of the brain. It actually shrinks the hippocampus. The thyroid gets this fight or flight and then decreases its function. The heart, chronic stress can lead to high blood pressure, erratic blood sugar, high cholesterol. You heard me right. Your stress can cause high blood sugar. So when you have stress, of course, that's going to happen. Your immune system is compromised. Your body produces more cortisol, which is a fat storage hormone. It instructs the body to take the sugar in your system and create fat. So all those things are happening while you're under stress. So we need to do that because our society lives in a world where it's all uptime, no downtime. We need to train our patients and ourselves to take time to relax, to do what we need to do to reboot our system, get out of that fight or flight response, and get into that rest and recovery of the brain. This is all part of a sequence, and we're not going to get rid of stress. If somebody tells you they're going to learn to get rid of stress, they're living on a different planet. The reality is that we are in a high stress, high pressure environment. That's not going to change, especially if you're a chiropractor out there right now, because as a chiropractor, you're probably the HR department, you're probably the training department, you're probably the marketing department, and also you're the clinical under your preview, and it's not going to get these. What you need to do is learn how to manage that stress or learn how to overcome it when you need to, and that can be done very easily by taking a brain tap break every day. Now, one of my good friends, his name is Dr. Richard Barwell. He wrote this book, Why You Get Sick and How Your Brain Can Fix It. And what we're showing here is a picture of somebody going through one of his scans. He calls them SRE scans, and we're looking at a stress response. And what he can show us, and he actually has proven with literally thousands of brain scans while chiropractors are making adjustments, that when you as a chiropractor make an adjustment, you've rebooted the brain, you've balanced that brain. Now it's time to teach the brain, and the brain learns through the subconscious, not through your conscious thoughts. You can't instruct your brain to do things through your conscious mind. It's a subconscious organ. It's like you can manipulate your heart, you can make it go faster or slower by your thoughts or through exercise, but your brain literally needs to be trained to operate in its efficient zones. You can do this through a few different ways. One, you can be doing neurofeedback. The problem is when you stop doing neurofeedback, the brain typically returns back to its norm, and that norm is probably a brain that is stressed out and in sympathetic survival syndrome. So if you add the brain tap to that, you're going to supercharge it. In fact, we've done this many times, and maybe on another call, Dr. John, we can take them through the connection between neurofeedback and a brain tap, but there's a big connection, and we can supercharge the results that people get. Now, Dr. Barwell, in these studies that he did, he came up with a really nice track here. If you look on the screen right now, we can tell if somebody's in a balanced nervous system. If you had this piece of paper, what he does is he passes this out, and his clients or patients would check mark all of these different boxes, and they would find out just through this questionnaire if somebody has a balanced nervous system or if they have an exhausted nervous system. Most of the time, a patient is going to have an exhausted nervous system. That's why they finally came to see you. Not because they're balanced in good health. They're coming to see you because there's something out of alignment. Something's wrong with that. Now, the difference between somebody who's under-aroused and over-aroused is an under-aroused nervous system. You can give a really powerful adjustment, no problem. But an over-aroused system, of course, you want to use light touch. Maybe even use a device to help you do that. So if the nervous system is unstable, the reality is that most of your patients are unstable, which means they fluctuate from one day to the next. One day they come in, they're under aroused. The next day they come in, they're over aroused. So as a chiropractor, you're not doing them any service by doing the same adjustment every time. You need a way to notice what's going on and how that happens. That's why we always say don't show them it's work, don't tell them it's working, show them it's working, because of things like heart rate variability and different tools that we have that show that. And when you come to the homecoming there in Phoenix, you're going to be able to get a chance to get your nervous system checked, and you can see how you're regulating, because it's something you can't experience from the outside in. You have to experience it from the inside out. And there are tools now like the heart rate variability that can show us those things, and we will have those there at the event. Now, when we think about the influences, what is causing all of this to happen in your life? Well, first of all, you have innate consciousness. This is an unconscious thing that's affecting you right now. It's out there, it's influencing you. You have innate neurological responses, which means a lot of what's going on with you right now, you have no idea they're happening, but they're influencing you. They're influencing you on an unconscious level. These could be influences from EMF. They could be influencing from different thought patterns. Remember, they could be thoughts, traumas, or toxins, as we all know. You're going to have these biochemical and mechanical changes that are happening through the toxins that are around. If you haven't cleaned out your liver, or you haven't done what you need to preserve your environment, to make sure that you're living in a sound environment that's not polluted with EMF. There's going to be habitual patterning that happens. 25% of the time when you wake up in the morning, you're going to do the same thing you did yesterday, even if you have all the great intentions in the world, because 25% of the time you go unconscious. It's just a fact. You're too busy doing other things. In fact, Bruce Lipton, who I had the privilege of just interviewing here a few days ago, he claims that 95% of our daily life is controlled by these habitual patterns. I've always heard it's 25%, so I was a little shocked when he shared that with me on the call. Now, we have adaptive capabilities that we have. Sometimes some people can adapt, improvise, and overcome, like the Marines. Other people can't. They're doing fine as long as nothing gets thrown in their way or some difficult situation happens. But this adaptability is so important. And unfortunately, now that we live in a world where everybody gets a trophy, everybody's a winner, nobody's really taught to adapt and overcome anything. They're just taught, oh, well, it's good enough where you are, we should give everybody a trophy. The reality is that sometimes failure becomes our best teacher. But if we don't ever let people fail, they don't ever get to teach themselves or learn what they need to do. And then now, finally, when we get conscious awareness, this is what everybody's working on. But if you look at all the other influences that are playing a role in your stress, your anxiety, your fear, the functions of your body, conscious awareness is almost the last thing you should be working on. We need to be working on all these external things that we have, like making sure that we give our body the proper nutrition it needs. We need to make sure our environment's right. We need to make sure that we're getting the rest, the relax, the recharging that we need. And then our conscious mind can help us. And then the reality is, when all that happens, we have system failure. That's when they come to see you as a chiropractor. They don't come to see you when everything's working great. And these rings, as you think about them, these are like rings of opportunity for the person. We live in a world of infinite possibility, but when we're under stress, we're fear-based, we're ill, or there's something going on that we feel is out of our control, all those options fade away. They melt into the background of our consciousness, and we simply become reactionary. And that reactionary mind is the thing that gets us in trouble, because that's where fight or flight reigns supreme. We need to somehow turn on that parasympathetic system and regulate our life from the inside out. When we're thinking about how to meditate or relax or brain tap, a lot of people think this is what it takes. When you look at her, she's meditating. Now, you can do this if you want, and I've had a lot of people, we're here at Life CE weekend here, and a lot of people think, oh, well, I meditate, that's good enough. The reality is, we have never met, ever. I say this right now, we've probably scanned at least 10,000 people. We've never met anyone who can meditate the correct way. Now, I've never evaluated a Buddhist adept or somebody like that, but they say it takes anywhere between 20 to 30 years of dedicated practice to become a meditator. What we say is, we don't have time for that. That's why we created BrainTap. We want to have the neurological benefits of rebooting our system, turning on the parasympathetic system, bringing light into our brain, and that light causes vasodilation, as most of you know, working with Dr. John. It's going to cause blood flow, nitric oxide. We're going to stimulate the body's mitochondria at the core. And By doing a 20-minute session like this, you're going to reboot the brain as if you've slept for 3 to 4 hours. But the key thing here is you're going to disengage that sympathetic system and you're going to re-engage the parasympathetics. Now, this key to activating this pharmacy is to use visualization. So when somebody says, well, why do we need to visualize? Well, one reason is they've proven that visualization and proper affirmations can change over 2,300 gene expressions. This means you can change your destiny by changing the thoughts that you think. And it's not hairy-fairy now, it's not mumbo jumbo, it's literally scientific fact that you can do this. So we have to rehearse what we intend. We have to logically use our creative nature. Everyone has it. The unfortunate part is most people use their creative nature to create failures instead of successes. We have to set controls for our success, and we have to use the power of 3. Now, what do I mean by that? When we visualize something happening, if we just visualize it once, the brain will say, oh, that could have been a coincidence. When we visualize it twice, the brain says, wow, that happened once, it happened once again. But if it happens 3 times, the brain literally writes a neural program, a brain circuit that allows us to achieve that goal, because then the circuit's running. And as long as we keep that in the top of our mind through spaced repetition and rehearsal, the brain will create a goal-striving mechanism that will keep us moving actively and progressively in the direction of our goals. Now, we must use future pacing. What I mean by that is if we just have a great experience, but we don't place it on our timeline, or it's something that's going to happen, it's going to be like the old saying is, a goal without action is just a wish. So we need to put it in action. We need to put it out on our timeline. Now, the nice thing is that with the BrainTap system, I've already done all this for you. All you need to do is relax, close your eyes, start visualizing the results you want, and then I will instruct you. Now, there's also ones if you want to do it with just music and sound in that way too. But this is all done through something we call brainwave entrainment. Now, what do we mean by entrainment? This refers to your brain's capacity to respond to rhythmic sensory stimulus, such as pulsing light, sound, and vibration. In our program, we also have in the background one of Dr. Nogier's frequencies, 194 hertz frequency, that literally, because of its vibration and frequency nature, it instructs the brain and the bones to turn off the sympathetic overload and turn on parasympathetics. Now, this does this without your conscious mind. It doesn't care what you believe. It basically puts you into an environment. Just like as if you were to go to the ocean and sit by the waves, your body would literally respond to the ocean because the ocean is functioning at 10 cycles. 10 cycles, for those of you that know how the brain works, that's alpha. That's a state of relaxation, rest, and recovery. Now, imagine that you could go to the mountaintop. The difference between the ocean and the mountaintop is a mountaintop actually functions at 7.8 hertz frequency. That means you're in theta. Theta is the most powerful state for healing because it turns on parasympathetics in the system. The body then gets discretionary access to all of its resources, and then innate intelligence goes to work healing the body, and it doesn't take much effort on our part. Basically, if you can close your eyes, take a nap, the body can heal itself. Sleep is so important. Now, what are we talking about? For those that haven't found out at all what light and sound and vibration is, first of all, we're going to use strategic mind messaging. Remember, we can change 2,300 gene expressions with the right words and the right sequence and the right order. And your best thinking, or your patient's best thinking, brought them to see you in the first place. But their best thinking probably isn't going to help them out, or they wouldn't be seeing you. So we need to upgrade their thinking, just like we upgrade computers. We're going to use binaural beats, which means we're going to balance the hemispheres of the brain by putting a frequency in one ear and an alternate frequency in the other. With whatever the frequency difference is, the brain is going to match. So if I put a 200 hertz frequency in one ear, 210 in the other, the brain is literally going to hear 10 hertz frequency. Then it's going to follow it through an algorithm. Because not everyone can hear perfectly, we're going to go ahead and layer that with isochronic tones. Most of you listening have seen, heard, or experienced isochronic tones literally thousands of times in your life. You just didn't know that's what it was. When you go out into nature, our nature is considered an isochronic tone generator. That's what I was talking about when you go to the mountaintop or you go to the ocean. But in your offices, if you have a essential oils generator, that essential oil is triggering the brain through something called isochronic tones, but it's doing it through the smell. But if you have a babbling brook, like a waterfall or something in your office, you're now triggering alpha frequencies. So we know that essential oils can change brainwave frequencies. We know that isochronic tones can change that. We're going to introduce light therapy. The reason we use blue and red light is pretty simple. The blue light at 470 hertz or nanometers and the red light at 633 is going to bathe the body with light. It's going to change the way the body responds, but most importantly, the brain, because through the frequency following response of light through the closed eyes, the frontal lobe of the brain is going to stay active, which means now we're going to activate the rods and codes of the brain. So people that don't visualize very well are going to start to visualize better and better each time that they play it. And we're going to bring light into the brain. Light into the brain means that there's going to be that vasodilation, that blood flow, that circulation, and there's a whole host of other benefits that are happening through light therapy, because the light dosage somebody gets with a brain tap would be the same light dosage you would get if you were to put a laser. But these aren't lasers, these are low-level light therapy. Then the body absorbs it through the hemoglobin of the blood. Through photobiomodulation, it circulates through the body. It finds the mitochondria that isn't working correctly. That mitochondria acts like a negative pull of a battery, and the photons act as the positive. They then combine and it turns on the mitochondria to start the Krebs cycle of that cell, literally turning on the engine of metabolism and bringing back health to that cell. It happens over and over again. So the more you listen, the better it works, the better your brain functions, the better your body improves. And light, by the way, is the #1 most important underprescribed nutrient on earth, because we live in houses, we play in our houses, we don't go outside like we should, and we don't get the light from the sun in the way that we need to. And because of pollution, we're not getting the right light anyway anymore from our sun, unless we get up and we absorb, or there's a lot about sun eating. If you can get up in the morning and meet the morning sun, and then you meet the evening sun before it sets, those are the most important light rays for our body to regulate our body chemistry. We do this through something called auricular therapy. And we talked about this in one of our other talks with Dr. John, where we talked about the iridology, where your ear is literally a blueprint to the rest of the body. And the meridian lines in the body, we can run energy throughout the body system by putting energy into the ears, just like they did for 10,000 years in China. Now, when all of this is happening all at one time, something magical happens in the body. It's called the relaxation response. And this is happening for pleasure or for achievement. So it's not a stress response anymore. We supersede the stress response and we get into the relaxation response. So as this happens, the brain starts to operate in a higher level, just like those high-level athletes that operate in an area called the zone. We can start operating in that higher level ourselves. And that's what happens when you get into this sequence. Now, when I talked about Heidi Havoc, and if you don't know who she is and you're watching this video, please write down Heidi's name. She's a rock star in the chiropractic industry. She is proving that what you're doing as chiropractors is literally changing people's brains. The spine has always been said it's the keyboard to the brain, but she's proving that any adjustment in the body is literally an adjustment in the brain. And the nice thing here, as you see the picture, is that's her sitting there right next to the table, and her husband, Glenn, doing a brain tap session, because they're brain tappers. She's the one who followed through with the research and said, hey, now we have a tool that somebody can use, like a chiropractor, right after the adjustment, to give them the 20 minutes in that golden time, that 20 minutes that D.D. Palmer talked about after the adjustment, where the nervous system can now is primed for neuroplasticity. And that's what we're talking about. When it happens, then now we're inoculating our patients against the stress of the week or the next 3 days or the next day or that afternoon. Whenever you're going to see that patient again, we need to provide them with better and better skills to manage their nervous system. And the reality is the nervous system is 70% in the brain, 30% in the body. So as you adjust the body, you need to tune it into the brain, so there's that connection between the brain and the body, or what they know in heart rate variability as the coherency between the way the body functions and the brain functions. So when we bring that into alignment, now health can be realized in greater and greater qualities by the people that you're working with. While we're working with this, the key thing is, and one of the main reasons for this is when they're laying there relaxing, and this is an image of Audrey here, who works at the office. She's laying on one of our relaxation beds, which those of you that were at homecoming last year, you might remember Dr. DeWeese that was demonstrating these vibration beds. And while they're on that, she's experiencing the sound vibration through the body, and she's getting it through the ears, and she's using the light pad. So we can intensify it and even create a better and better state for healing. The faster we can get somebody into parasympathetics and the longer we can keep them there, the greater the healing will be, because that's the time that innate can do the work that needs to be done in the body. We're going to get rid of that interference, and we're going to let the body take care of itself by putting it into the right state. That state recover, digest, and all of those positive things that happen when the body's in the right state. Now, when you think of the brain, this is one of the screens that when you come to homecoming, we'll be able to put you on the equipment, show you what your brain looks like right now. We're showing this equipment that we have, the BrainTap HRV. We can actually take a snapshot of the energy that's moving across the right and left hemisphere of the brain. We call this the brain's electrical activity. So before someone had done the brain tapping session, it was 40% here. After they did it, it was 88%. This is not uncommon, but the nice thing is that this equipment is so easy to use and it's so portable that we're going to have a couple of those setups at the Brim Hall homecoming, and you can go ahead and get your brain scanned when you come there. And this, unlike most neurofeedback programs, this takes less than 5 minutes. So instead of having to put the goo on your head and do all of those things, it's very simple. It uses a process called galvanic skin response. We can measure the stress in your brain, and we can show you how you're eliminating that stress. And it's something that's very affordable for you to have at your office if you choose to do that. Now, why is this important? And here's a picture of me with Bruce Lipton, and he talks about people live in unresourceful states. These are low frequency states, but we want to get them to live in the resourceful states, the high frequency states. Now, what do we mean by that? The unresourceful states are states of stress, fear, frustration, anxiety, anger. They have no resources they can't access their resources because they're in fight or flight. They're in that sympathetic survival syndrome. If that looks like a press release for CNN, you're exactly right, because our news cycle is all built upon fear, frustration, anxiety, and controlling the masses. So we want to eliminate that. We want to get out of this reactionary state and into more of a resourceful state, creating a state of calm, focused, happy feelings. This gives us full resources, full access to those resources. So part of that is just practicing and rehearsing. When you're in that state, you can create the habit of being happy, making good decisions, and making that state a reality for you. That's what we want for everyone listening here. And there is a way to do that. It's as easy as taking a little 15 to 20 minute nap every afternoon, or starting off your day with one of our 10-minute, what we call digital coffee, so your body can be stimulated. Now, we talked about this in one of the past conversations we have with Dr. John here, but it's so important stressing your DNA. When you talk about being in sympathetic survival syndrome, these studies have shown that the stress is linked to shortening your telomeres. And I'm only saying this because we all have a one-way journey here. We're all have a one-way pass out of here. We don't know when we're expected to leave, but we can quicken that path if we want to stress out. Now, if we can learn to relax, they also have shown that telomeres will grow back. So these telomeres are chromosome components that are associated with aging, risk of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So at all costs, one of the best things you can do to prevent anti-aging that most people overlook because they're looking for a magic pill, the best thing you can do is learn to de-stress and to do it repeatedly every day. So you have a tool at your disposal where you can put it on, relax, it can reboot your system get you de-stressing as easy as taking a few deep breaths and letting it guide you through the process. Now, this stress also affects future generations. So if you don't remember what I told you in one of the last calls, you can go back through the library on the Brim Hall website or on the internet, and you can read through what we talked about, because they have now proven scientifically that your stress literally affects 7 generations forwards and backwards. These telomeres, these gene expressions, actually work like a radio signal that turns off and on with your relatives. Your immediate family is being affected. So when you change yourself, when you change your stress, you're literally changing your family stress. So, we should all do this together, obviously, to get our stress levels down. Now, why is it important for visualizing, affirmations, and mental rehearsals? Well, the main reason is that this training process retrains the brain to do different things. It's going to increase confidence and motivation. It's going to improve your self-image. It's going to eliminate limiting beliefs. You're going to accelerate the learning process. When you get into these states of alpha and theta that we're talking about here, those states are known as hypermnesia, supermemory states. So at that level of the mind, you can begin to learn better, faster. And today we're in an information age. When they say knowledge is power, that's not necessarily true. Knowledge applied is power, and that's what we want. So we're going to increase the level of performance a person has by visualizing and then realizing those dreams. But you have to be in the right state. Just like your body has to be in the right state to digest, metabolize, and use the nutrients that you're providing it. If you put those nutrients into a highly sympathetic system, you're probably going to just eliminate most of the positive benefits of that supplement. But if you can train your brain to be relaxed, that's why it's so important, if before you eat, that you calm down the nervous system. Some people do this by prayer. Some people do this just by settling and relaxing, and why they don't recommend that you eat and watch the news or something like that, or even read a book. You should, when you're eating, you should be eating consciously so that you're relaxed and you can get the benefits of everything. Now, when you think about your brain, the reason the headline here is your brain working like a symphony or a one-man band? This slide that I'm showing you is 41% delta. When we do events, this would be a good first brain scan for most people that we scan. This is not a good brain scan, because when your brain's that much in delta, you're losing a lot of energy. Think about it like an energy link or a leak, because when it's like running with a parachute behind you, the brain's trying to shut down, but you want it to wake up. And so then when you go to sleep, it flips on you. And people that don't sleep well, part of the problem is they're hanging out in delta all day. Then when they finally get into bed and they start to relax, the brain says, oh, now our body's comfortable and relaxed. Now we can start to think about our day. And that's not the time to do that. So the perfect brain looks something like this: 42% beta, 26% alpha. And as you notice, all the brain waves are represented here. There's not one brain wave that isn't important. It's the balance of those brain waves. So part of the reason that people can't meditate and they don't get the results of meditation like they think, or that the research shows, is because when they meditate, they literally increase their delta activity without improving their alpha beta response. And that's where we excel, because we're using, again, light through closed eyelids to keep the frontal lobe active, which is going to trigger that alpha beta response. The problem isn't that you're not getting the rest that you need, it's that your brain isn't waking up because it's not trained to do that. So part of it is getting you into a deep state of relaxation. The other part is getting your brain to get back into the optimum range for living your life. We need to have alpha beta to make really good decisions and to make good cognitive processes work for you. Now, let's talk a little bit about what happens if you're not getting into these deep states, you're not going through these brainwave cycles. First of all, when you think about the electrical activity of the brain, when we're in beta, this all happens from the frontal lobe perspective. The neurons that produce dopamine are triggered when you go through beta activity. So that's why almost every addiction has a dopamine response. So most people, when they're feeling bad or they're not getting in, they're overstressed, they're not able to produce dopamine because now they're overproducing dopamine. And if you're overproducing it at certain times, you don't get the reward anymore. You have to get more and more and more. That's why there's so much crazy stuff on television or in movies, because people are trying to get this dopamine response because they're overproducing it every day through stress. Once we learn to relax and regulate this dopamine response, and by the way, the gut makes these neurotransmitters, and there's more dendrite connections or neuron connections in the gut than there are in the brain. So that's why there's that gut-brain axis that we need to work on. While you're going through the alpha brainwave activity, and this is one of the reasons people like to meditate or do their hobbies, is you're instructing the neurons to produce acetylcholine. So as you think about how the brain works, this is what helps you to feel good. So and it's all produced in the parietal lobes, but if you're so stressed out, you don't get enough alpha activity, your brain's not going to instruct the gut to produce enough acetylcholine. So you're not going to be able to be creative. You're not going to problem solve. You're not going to be able to visualize. So this is part of what's happening here, is we're getting the body back to producing the right amount of these neurotransmitters that are needed. When you're going through this cycle of brain tapping or parasympathetics, when you're in the deep levels of theta, which is where parasympathetics is really turned on, that's when the neurons that produce GABA are triggered, and the gut is instructed to produce GABA here. So as you think about all these things, each one of these neurotransmitters are so important, but unless you trigger the brain to do that, and unless you're getting the sleep necessary through these cycles, these brainwave cycles, 5 to 6 times, and then experiencing what's called a delta burst. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment. Delta burst is so important to bringing energy back to the system. So when you're in delta, you produce serotonin. The problem is, just like with the slide that I showed you before, is that when you overproduce delta, your body overproduces serotonin, which means the brain stops producing it. And then you're not getting the response with it, because the serotonin that is in your brain is becoming toxic and is unusable. That's why they started giving serotonin uptake inhibitors. But if we can start regulating the brain out of delta when you don't need delta, and only have delta in low doses, like 10% or less while you're awake, the brain will produce the right amount of serotonin, and people will feel good, because this is how you feel good. You feel rested, you have a positive mood, and your brain resynchronizes at those levels. Now, in Scientific America back in May 2016, they came out with an article that said, hey, there's lymphatic vessels in the brain. Now, they were always there, but they're talking about now that they discovered them. Now, when we talk about detoxing the brain and getting things past the blood-brain barrier, it's so important that we sleep. In fact, the article said, and we all know this, hopefully everyone on the call knows, that sleeping is truly the lasting key to health. But if you don't reach this deep level sleep, you never trigger this internal plumbing system that we have. This system in the brain that detoxes the brain, it only happens during level 4 sleep. So when you get this level 4 sleep, there's a cleanup that happens in the brain. And let me explain this. This cleanup is the only time your brain detoxes. If it doesn't detox during this cleanup, you get what's called leaky brain. In the same way that I know that all of you have heard from Dr. John and all the nutritional experts at Brimhall that you can have a leaky gut, you can have a leaky brain, and this all happens because you're not getting the deep level 4 sleep that you need. At night, a healthy brain will reach level 4 sleep 4 to 6 times during the night. During that time, literally, the nervous system goes offline. So most of you have probably experienced something called sleep paralysis. If you woke up during sleep paralysis, you literally woke up in the middle of one of these level 4 cleaning cycles, because we're locked out of our nervous system so the brain can do what it needs to do, in the same way that if we were to clean a line in a factory, we'd need to shut down the line, clean it, and then re-engage the line of activity. So true with the nervous system. So that's why deep level 4 sleep is so important. So if somebody drinks coffee or is drinking a lot of alcohol before they go to bed, this is going to disrupt the sleeping cycle. So, if you do that occasionally, it might be all right, but if you do it every day, it's going to create this sympathetic survival syndrome that we talk about, because stress, remember, it's going to happen from thoughts, traumas, or toxins. And toxins in the brain create so much problems. And to be very honest, the simple solution to most of these problems is to get better sleep. But the problem is, 1 out of 3 people are having a sleeping problem, and they're not getting their sleep being met because of a lot of different reasons. Not to mention, it could be their environment from EMF. It could be their diet by not taking the right supplements and nutrients. It could be their physical fitness because they're not getting enough exercise. All of these things play into a good natural sleep. It's not usually your pillow or your bed, but those are what people will go do. And it's not because you're missing out on the right sleeping pill. So people are looking for pills to these solutions when there is a natural solution to doing this. So when we look at this slide, the most important thing with HRV is the standard that shows what is your nervous system doing, because if your nervous system is regulating or coherent, which means your heart is communicating with your brain and your brain is communicating with your heart, when that's coherent, then that's a sign of good health. So this person, before they did their brain tap session, was at 33%. After their brain tap session, they were able to bring it up to 96%. This is so exciting. When we do an event like Brim Hall Wellness, we'll do it for the whole group, whoever can get over there and get screened, and then we'll do an assessment at the office of that event. Typically, we'll see between 25 to 33% improvement of neurological function after a 15-minute demonstration session, which means most people can respond back, especially in the chiropractic world, because you've been using chiropractic care. So the body knows how to regulate the nervous system. So if we give it the right environment, it knows how to go back to a healthy state. The problem is your nervous system is always rebooting every 72 hours. So you could be the world's greatest chiropractor, and if that person doesn't do exactly what they need to keep their nervous system healthy, it's going to go back to their neurological norm. And so unless you've seen them over time or with enough frequency, there's a good chance they could go back to an abnormal biorhythm or coherency, which signifies the degradation of their nervous system and health. When you think about the cells of your body and why this is so important, cells are machines driven by energy. We live in an energy-driven economy. And most of you know that you're moving the nervous system when you're making an adjustment, but you don't realize what you're really doing is you're re-energizing the cells of the body of the person you're working with. You're literally an energy practitioner. So as an energy medicine practitioner, you are re-engaging or rebooting not just the brain, but the cells of the body through the nervous system. In every culture, every medical tradition before ours, healing was always accomplished by moving energy. So we move energy obviously by light, sound, and vibration. We have the brain tap headset, which have frequency response. We have the brain tap Oasis chair, which brings sound frequency through the body. And we use light to intensify and bring energy to the cells. So when you have all of that going in the right environment, especially after a chiropractic adjustment, now you're talking about the magic that the body can have by letting innate do the work that needs to be done because people are in the right environment. What does this show up in the body? Well, one of the things that this heart rate variability shows is your biological age. We have the actual age of the body, then we have our biological age, which is how our nervous system and our biology is working. This person showed up at 62 years old as an actual age, biological age 57. That's pretty good. Then after they did their brain tap session, they had a really great response. Now they brought it down to 34 years old because you're only as young as your spine is flexible and your nervous system is operating. So as the spine goes and the nervous system flows, the brain can be activated. It can bring this biological age down to, a biological norm. Instead of acting your age, you want your nervous system to be acting much younger. In fact, I like what Dr. Wayne Dyer said. He said, never let an old person inhabit your body. And you can show that by people who don't have neurological function. Of course, they walk slowly. They have to really be careful about how they move. And of course, kids don't act that way because their nervous system is flexible and nimble. And we can get that back to that way by taking care of our bodies through proper nutrition, proper brain health, and proper adjustments. Now, when we talk about being at Brim Hall Wellness this year at the homecoming, one of the things you can look forward to is working with weight loss. The key thing about weight loss is how do we get the body's metabolism working? Well, certainly we can do that through nutritional supplementation, but if we can get them into parasympathetics and get them using the brain tap, magic happens. This is what happened to this person. They started with on 120 units of metabolic energy. After their brain tapping session, they had 363. Their metabolism was on fire and it was burning fat. The key to this is the nervous system itself, once engaged, can be far more efficient than even exercise. So as your body and mind starts to work together, you can start to magnetize the body to health instead of relying on it to become unhealthy. There's no reason our nervous systems can't be as healthy as they were when we were young. When we think about this, I just want to talk about my own 6 steps to brain-based wellness, not to be confused with Dr. John's version, but just to give you an idea of how the brain tap works. Number 1, we need to teach everyone how to disassociate. They need to eliminate the fear from their life. If somebody's coming in fearing they're going to be ill, I like to remind them of what Job said in the Bible. Job said, "What I have feared greatly has come upon me." We don't want people to have the Job effect. We want them to understand and anticipate and respond in a healthy way. And part of that is disassociating from the negativity that's part of our reality. When we associate with positive thinking and positive actions, wonderful things happen in our body. These wonderful things begin, and they start with memories. So if you start to associate with the most positive, optimistic memories, your body, through mirror neurons, will create those same environments, creating health and harmony in the system. Then we've got to teach the brain what we call flow states, being in the moment, thinking positively, even in the most difficult situations. This can happen if we mentally rehearse, practice, and just rely on past behaviors. We're probably going to get the same past results. So we also need to future pace, meaning that we're going to start co-creating. We don't have to take what we've always got. Remember, we can turn on or off those 2,300 different gene expressions. In fact, there was a cancer study that was done with a group, and half the group was just given chemotherapy. The other half was given chemotherapy and visualization techniques. And after a month worth of the treatment, the half that just had chemotherapy had no gene expression changes at all. The half that were using visualization for being healthy and visualizing white marker cells and the body improving, they had over 500 different gene expressions that had improved, that all had to do with being healthy and not had to do with anything about cancer. So the cancer was being reversed by their own brain and body, focusing on the positive and eliminating the negative. We want to sort out these polarities, because when you start to operate from your highest intention, which means thinking of health first and then activity second, you'll find that you'll start to align with your higher values, and health will just become a natural byproduct of it. And then the next step is, and why brain tapping is so important, is when you start acting as if. You've got to be the change in your mind first. And just to bring into everyone's awareness what happens with weight loss. The sad thing about weight loss, and the picture that I showed was when we were featured in People magazine, because we can help people take half their weight off. That was Rob Powell. He had kept it off for more than 5 years. It's now been over 23 years, and he is still naturally thin because his brain changed. Not because of the food he ate as much as his brain changed. Now, obviously, he eats better food, he drinks better water or better beverages, he exercises, but first he became the change in his mind. The worst thing that can happen to somebody who's overweight is that they lose the weight and they still possess their overweight mind. That overweight mind will always win. So we want to make sure we change the mind first, and the body always follows. Now, when you think about the brain tap, we have a new program that's coming out. So if you're already using brain tap in your office, you should call our office so we can show you what's going on. We have a program we're calling the BTAP, where we're going to actually help you to get your patients involved with brain tap by putting $200 down and $50 a month. And we have a revenue share going on, and we can drop ship these for your patients. The only thing you need to do is sign up, become a reseller or a location licensee, so that we can provide you with the marketing materials. So that's something I just want to make everyone aware of that's on this call. And then if you haven't read my book, you can text the number here, 925-278-6787. You can text the word THRIVE, and you can get a free copy of my book that goes into detail about this Sympathetic Survival Syndrome, how you can overcome it. And you can share that if you'd like, even with your patients. They can get that free book and start to understand how the combination between chiropractic care and overcoming the sympathetic survival syndrome works. So there we go, Dr. John. If you want to take over, and if we have any questions, we can go from there.
I think you smoked them so bad they have no questions. That was
Okay.
amazing. It's just a shame we only have an hour, and he went through an hour so fast we probably thought it was 10 minutes. But it's so exciting, the lineup that we have for homecoming this year. Dr. Porter's on 2 different times because we want him to do more of the implementation of how we actually use it. And he'll have an entire staff. Well, you bring 8 or 10 people, something like that, right, Doc?
Yes, yeah, we'll have at least 8 people.
And so, and then the machines to test and treat. So if you just stayed out in the hall, it'd be worth your while. The problem is you're going to miss Dr. Brett, who has an incredible integrated practice where he uses brain tap for most of his patients. Dr. Smaldone is one of the best adjusters and tapers on the planet. Last time he came, about 4 years ago, we had to kick the people out of the room finally to look at close it down at night. So that's going to be incredible. Dr. Harris is a crazy guy who graduated from high school at 7, college at 9. Before his 12th birthday, he had 3 PhDs, an MD, and an ND. He actually had 4, but he doesn't count one because it was only biology. So as far as the PhDs go, Dr. Harper was one of our teachers in the stem cell world. Will also be there. He teaches integrated practice. Doug Grant now owns OHS. He'll be on the platform for anytime we're not in the main platform. He'll be teaching at 3 hours a day each day, plus from the main platform. And then I'm not too shabby myself. I can't talk as fast as Dr. Porter, and I thought I was the fastest in the world. So don't miss us. Dr. Porter we were so excited to have him with us there and have his whole team there. I mean, literally bring your staff, have them trained right there how to do this and implement it in your office. Good night, gang. God bless Dr. Porter and all of you that are helping to bring wellness to the world. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.